Welcome to Debt Free in 30, where every week we take 30 minutes and talk to industry experts about debt, money, and personal finance. I'm Doug Hoyes. Normally, the last Debt Free in 30 show every month is a frequently asked questions show, but we found that we have so many questions that our listeners want answered that during the first few weeks of the month of July, we're going to take the time to answer your most frequently asked questions. To help me do that, I've asked my Hoyes Michaelis trustees to join me on the show, and today I'm joined by a first-time guest on the show. So let's get started. Who are you? Where do you work? And what do you do?
Hi, Doug. Thanks for having me on here. My name is Adam Rauff. I've been working with Hoyes Michaelis for 6 years. I'm a trustee out of the St. Catharines, Niagara region.
Excellent. Well, thanks for being here today, Adam. Before we get into the specific questions, you've got a bit of a unique background amongst the trustees here at the firm. So can you give us the quick overview of how you got into the whole debt help business?
Oh, sure. When I graduated university, I was actually a chemistry math teacher for a couple of years. I also worked in special education, always working with a population that was coming from a bit of a difficult or disadvantaged background. As my time progressed through education, I really enjoyed what I was doing, but I also wanted something that was a little bit more consistent. There's a lot of new teachers listening. They can understand and appreciate how difficult it is to find that full-time job. So I always wanted to work in finance, and I sent my resume to your partner, Ted Michaelis. He offered me a job on a Friday. You offered me a heart attack on a Monday, and here we are.
Excellent. Well, we like people to know what they're getting into when they join this business. So what I asked you to do before the show was to write down the 5 most common questions that you get asked when people come in to see you. And you came up with a list of like 20 of them, because obviously there's a lot of questions people ask. So what I'm going to do is kind of pick from your list, and we'll go through them in no specific order. So this should be interesting for people that who are listening to get an idea of the kind of questions people are asking, because they're probably the kind of questions that people who are listening would also ask. A couple of the questions related to cars. And obviously you said that you work in the Niagara region. Everybody drives a car there, I assume, or most people. There's no subway, as far as I know, from Niagara Falls to St. Catharines or anything like that. So here's one of the questions that someone asked you. And this is a very common question. I've been asked a variant of this question many times myself. So the question is, I made the mistake of financing a car at 18%, and I owe like $40,000 on a car that, it's now only worth $6,000. And probably what happened in that case was they had a car, they refinanced, bought another car, there was a shortfall, it got rolled into the next car, and so now you've got a car with significant negative equity. So how do you help someone in that situation?
Well, yeah, that's an excellent summary of what we see, Doug. So oftentimes the first worry that a lot of individuals have is, am I going to lose my car if I file a proposal or bankruptcy? The short answer is no. As long as you keep making payments on it, you get to keep the vehicle and other secured assets. But the biggest option that a lot of individuals don't realize is, hey, can I actually get out of this secured financing contract through a proposal or a bankruptcy? And thankfully, the answer is yes. If you think you're in financial problems and it's more than just credit card debt or line of credits, things of that nature, and you have a vehicle, you know it's going to break down and you're going to end up owing like $30,000 or $40,000 on it. If you file a proposal or a bankruptcy and you stop paying for that vehicle before you file, then you can include the debt in as like a regular credit card debt in your filing.
So let's kind of break this down, because you've hit on a number of different points there. So proposals and bankruptcies deal with unsecured debt. So
Correct.
That's things like credit cards, bank loans, and so on. A car loan is a secured debt. It's secured by the car.
Correct.
What you're saying is, yeah, but if you stop making the payments on the car and return the car, surrender the car to the lender, then the security is no longer there. Therefore, it's an unsecured debt, and therefore it's included in the proposal or the bankruptcy.
That is correct.
And is this a pretty common thing that you see?
It is. Unfortunately, the auto industry has really changed in the face of Canada over the last 5 or 6 years, with a lot of lenders saying finance the car for 7, 8 years. Individuals do, but the car will break down after 3 or 4. Like you had mentioned earlier, they get a new vehicle, they roll the vehicle from the debt from the old vehicle into the new vehicle, and oftentimes we see people that have to pay for one car 3 or 4 times over. And a lot of the times the interest rates are obscene. The question that we proposed was 18%. I've seen it as high as 30%.
Yeah, if you're financing a used vehicle, then the interest rate's going to be a lot higher.
Correct. So a lot of times, one of the great tools and aspects about a consumer proposal or personal bankruptcy is that if you want to walk away from a vehicle, you have that option. Of course, that means you're probably not going to have a car because in most instances, the creditors are going to repossess the vehicle, sell it at auction, and whatever the difference you owe, it's part of the proposal or bankruptcy. So what I tell individuals is the best thing, cash is king. Buy a used car for $5 or $6 grand, a nice little Corolla or Honda, and see if that can help get you around town. Maybe you can work with family or friends to help you out in the meantime if you think you can't finance one. So that's what I always try and encourage individuals.
Yeah, look at your options. So I always say to people, okay, I understand that you need a car to get to work because there is no subway, there is no bus service. I work the night shift, I get off at 2 a.m., the buses aren't running then. So I understand that I need a car, but you don't need this car. You don't need this exact car that you have. So what options do you have? So the first option is, how can I survive at least for a period of time without a vehicle?
Correct.
Can I carpool? Can I take taxis? Can I ride my bike? If it's the summer, riding a bike maybe makes sense. If it's the middle of winter, maybe not so much. And then I agree with you. Cash is king. You give up the car. Now you're not making the car payments. You're not paying insurance. You're not paying for gas. Well, you can probably save up a chunk of money to buy that old junker, something just to get you back and forth to work. And even if it's $1,000 or $2,000, well, that's a lot better than the alternative, paying this huge loan. So now, what about the case of someone who has a car that, let's say it's a relatively new car, it's got very low interest financing on it, it doesn't have a whole lot of mileage on it, so it kind of makes sense to keep it. Am I able to keep it?
That's an excellent question as well, too. And yes, this is the common question we have for a lot of individuals, is that they're filing a proposal or a bankruptcy, they have a lot of debt with credit cards, line of credits, things of that nature, but they really want to keep the vehicle. Are they allowed to? And the answer is yes. They can keep the car. By filing a proposal or a bankruptcy, it will not affect your renewals or your interest rates or any of that nature. As long as you keep paying for it, the lender is more than welcome to have you keep that car so they can get paid as well too.
Yeah, they're in business. If you can keep paying, great. So to summarize then, if you've got a car that's financed, you've got two choices when you're facing a proposal or a bankruptcy. You can stop paying and give the car back.
Correct.
And whatever is owing gets included in the proposal or bankruptcy. Or you can continue to make the payments on the car if it's a secured loan. So long as you're up to date with the payments, you can continue making those payments and keep the car. Ultimately, this is a math question. Does it make sense in your original example, if you've got a $40,000 loan outstanding on a car that's only worth $6,000, does it make sense to keep making the loan payments? No, it doesn't. That's kind of ridiculous. But if it's a car that is worth about what's owing on the loan, the interest rate is reasonable, then it probably does make sense. So excellent. Well, we got to one question in the first segment. I know a lot of people ask you about the 407 and how that relates to cars and everything. So what I'd like to do is take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and talk about what happens to your 407 debt if you file a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back here on Debt Free in 30.
Looking for information on budgeting, debt consolidation, credit counseling, debt management, and debt settlement? For unbiased advice, go to moneyproblems.ca, the website for Canadians with money problems who want money solutions. moneyproblems.ca.
We're back. I'm joined today by Adam Rauff, and we are talking about questions that Adam gets asked quite frequently by people who come in to get his assistance. Before the break, we were talking about what happens to a car, and that kind of leads to the question about the 407. The 407 ETR, the express toll route where you have a transponder, you got to pay every time you get on it. So Adam, what happens if I owe a bunch of money to the 407 and I go bankrupt or file a proposal? What's the deal there?
Well, that's a great question. Unfortunately, it's not an easy answer. So, according to the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, when you go bankrupt or file a proposal, there are only a certain amount of debts that cannot be included. The 407 is definitely a debt like a credit card debt or a line of credit that is included in a proposal or bankruptcy.
Okay, so that's the first key point. In the Bankruptcy Act, there are a specific list of debts that don't go away when you go bankrupt. Things like child support, for example.
Correct.
Court, fines, restitution orders, things like that. But the 407 is not a court fine.
That is correct.
Therefore, in your interpretation, and I agree with you, that is not one of the debts that is automatically excluded from a bankruptcy. Therefore, it should go away. But obviously, there's more to the story than that.
That's right. The 407 was a government-owned business, and it was recently, about 5-10 years ago, I believe, it was transferred to a private corporation. When it was transferred, that private corporation wanted to say, well, we want to protect ourselves. So we are going to team up with the Ministry of Transportation, MTO, and we're going to not allow anybody to renew their license plates until the debt is paid, regardless if they file a proposal or bankruptcy. That's actually in the Highway Traffic Act. That's actually against the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act. So right now, there is a very large court battle that is going on, and it's actually at the Supreme Court of Canada. The matter has been heard, and we're hoping that a judgment will be passed, obviously in favor of the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act.
So, and as we're recording this in July of 2015, we're telling you what we know as of today. If you're listening to this podcast at some point in the future because you've downloaded it from iTunes or whatever, then what we're saying may already be out of date. So if you have 407 debts, the best thing to do is give us a shout. Go to our website at hoyes.com, HOYES.com, and look us up, and we can tell you what's happening. So the current state of the rules is 407 is still, whether they can or they can't, whether it's legal or not, it is still currently not possible to renew your license if you have money owing to 407.
Well, that's right. Now, it's not your license that they will deny. It's actually your license plates on your vehicle.
So it what attaches to the car. So that's a key point. You can still renew your license. So what we've seen a lot of people do is say, okay, well, like we talked about in the first segment, I'm giving my car up anyways because I'm going bankrupt. Well, fine. Then I guess I can't renew that particular plate. But if I finance a different car, or if my spouse buys a car, well, I guess it's not an issue. Otherwise, if you need to renew that plate, what's your advice to that person?
Well, if you need to renew that plate and you have filed a proposal or a bankruptcy, or you have successfully completed a proposal or a bankruptcy and the 407 debt was part of it, but you're really stuck and you have to pay that debt, whatever it is, I spoke with the lawyer who is handling the 407 class action lawsuit, and he said you make the payment under protest, where you actually say you write on the receipt, it's under protest. I'm only making this because the 407, teaming up with the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario, MTO, is forcing me to do it. And hopefully down the future, when hopefully it will be ruled in favor of the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, you should actually get that money reimbursed to you.
Yeah, and we have no idea what's going to happen in the future. We don't know what's going to happen with court cases. So you might as well assume the money's gone because we don't know any different at this point. But I think what Adam's giving is a very practical answer. Well, if I have to get that plate renewed, the only way to do it is to make the payment, make it under protest. Maybe in the future you'll be able to have that overturned. Maybe not. We don't know. But it is a complicated area, and it's one of those things where it's difficult for us to give a coherent answer because there have been numerous court challenges on this issue, and probably the law will continue to evolve. So it's a bit of a tricky one. So
it is difficult. What I have told some individuals that are very desperate, they can't pay the debt. I said, well, one way you can do to circumvent it is try and see if you can get a new license plate. Unfortunately, that sometimes does not work because, again, MTO will say, well, no, we can't give you a new plate because you still have this debt with the 407. So then what we sometimes tell individuals is, well, maybe what you need to do is put the vehicle under your spouse or your partner's name, and that way you put the plates under their name so you can get the license plate renewed so you can continue driving safely and legally.
Yeah, so it's not really a license plate renewal. It's a brand new plate, for a brand new situation. So
correct.
So it is a complicated situation, but there's a kind of quick overview of what's happening with the 407. So let's go to a couple of these other questions that people ask you. One of them you get a lot is, what happens if I pay my proposal early? Is there some kind of penalty? So a typical proposal is going to be set up where you're making monthly payments over a period of time. Maybe you're paying $300 or $400 a month for 4 or 5 years. And one of the advantages of a proposal is if your situation improves, I get a raise at work, I get a bonus, I get a tax-free refund, you can use that money to pay your proposal quicker. So Are you able to do that? And if so, what's the penalty for doing that?
Yeah, and that's a great question we see a lot. So the longest a proposal can be is 5 years, which is 60 months. And individuals like, well, I don't want to be in a 5-year payment plan. I would really like to try and rebuild my credit quicker. So I said, well, not a problem. If you are able to accelerate your payments and pay it off sooner, the sooner you pay it off, the sooner your debts are legally discharged, the sooner you get what is called your certificate of full performance, and to rebuild your credit. And that proposal, that R7 rating, comes off when the proposal is paid in full. There is no penalty for paying it off. Creditors don't ask, well, how were they able to pay it off early? Because a lot of times individuals may get help for family or friends. Sometimes, like as you mentioned, they come to a bonus at work. Maybe there's some sort of an inheritance received. If you win $50 million, just pay off your proposal and you're good to go.
And that's one of the big advantages of a proposal. You can get it done quicker. So how does that contrast then with a bankruptcy? So how long does a bankruptcy last? Because that's, again, another question people ask you. I mean, they ask you, well, is a bankruptcy 9 months or is it 21 months? People keep telling me different things. What's the answer to that question?
Yeah, and there's a lot of misinformation that's out there because I see people in my office, they say, well, my friend went bankrupt 5 years ago. It was only 9 months or 12 months. Why are you telling me it's going to be 9 months or 21 months, almost 2 years for a first-time bankruptcy? Well, the laws changed in 2009. Depending on your household income and your household size, bankruptcy will either be a quick, clean, easy 9-month process. But if you are making more than what the federal courts allow for your family size, then the courts say, if you go bankrupt, we're going to extend it by an extra year. So it goes from 9 months to 21 months in duration. So let's say you go bankrupt, and let's say you're within the government guidelines, no problems, your bankruptcy is done, quick, clean, easy, 9-month process. If you pay the trustee the fees that the trustee requires, let's say on day 1, you are still in the legal state of bankruptcy for that 9 months. Unfortunately, you do not get out of it any sooner. You can pay the fees off so you don't have to worry about the payments, but whatever length of time as dictated by the federal law, regardless of how soon or how quickly you pay off the bankruptcy, you're still in it for that period of time.
And just to clarify some of the terms here. So in most cases, if you go bankrupt, there is a contribution. It's not really a fee because fees are set by the government. Whatever you're paying to the trustee does not go directly into the trustee's pocket. There is a contribution you make every month. So let's say, for example, that, based on your situation, you agree, yeah, I'm going to contribute a couple of $100 a month for the 9 months that I'm bankrupt, and that goes towards the cost of the administration filing the bankruptcy. Some of that money comes to the trustee, some of it goes to, the costs and so on. So what you're saying is in a 9-month bankruptcy, if the total you're going to end up having to pay is going to be, let's say, $1,800, you could pay that all on day 1. If your mother writes you a check, here's the money, great, it's done. But you are still in the state of bankruptcy for 9 months.
That's correct.
That's just the way it is. The only way that could ever possibly end earlier would be if the court says it can end earlier. And unfortunately, it takes about a year to get to court. So it's almost impossible to have a bankruptcy done any quicker than 9 months.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, the 21 months then kicks in when your income is over the limit. So what you're talking about there is surplus income. If you're over the limit, it's a first-time bankruptcy, you're going to be bankrupt for an extra year. That's where the 21 months comes from.
That's right. And a lot of individuals, we see that most individuals will try and avoid a bankruptcy at all costs, especially if their first-time bankruptcy is going to be 21 months. That's almost 2 years. And then when you're discharged from that 21 months, it still stays on your credit report for 6 years afterwards. So in the Niagara region, I'd say about 70 to 80% of the people I see will file a consumer proposal as a way of avoiding bankruptcy.
And with a consumer proposal, it stays on your credit record for how long after you make your last payment?
Well, it's an R7 while the proposal is active. As I had mentioned earlier, you pay it off sooner, the R7 comes off sooner. Then once the proposal is paid in full, there is a footnote on your credit report for 3 years. You can get mortgages and car loans, things of that nature once the proposal is completed. Yeah,
and obviously the fact that you filed a proposal is a negative as compared to having paid off all your debts in full, so it will have an impact on whether you can get a mortgage, borrow money, but it doesn't exclude you from doing so. The mortgage broker or the bank may say, well, we need a slightly higher deposit. We might need there might be a higher interest rate, but the point you're making is the time period is greatly shortened. 3 years roughly in a proposal 6 years after you finish paying in a bankruptcy. So if you know that you're going to be bankrupt for 21 months because of what your income is, a proposal is a way to potentially shorten that period if you can pay the proposal off in a quick period of time. So
exactly. And where that's actually an even more powerful and more advantageous aspect of a proposal is if you, let's say you had a previous bankruptcy from a previous life, just whether it's a relationship breakdown, loss of work, medical issues, what have you. If you are in financial dire straits again and you need to think about whether you need to file a proposal or a bankruptcy, a second bankruptcy is more punitive. Basically, if you were to go bankrupt a second time, it's minimum 2 years in length or potentially extended to 3 years if you are above the government's guideline for surplus income. And once you complete a second bankruptcy, it's on your record for 14 years afterwards. So you're looking either at 2 years plus 14 years, 16 years total, or 3 years plus 14 years, which is 17 years total. So a lot of individuals, I'd say over 95% of the people I see that have previous bankruptcies will file a consumer proposal to avoid the second bankruptcy.
yeah, if it's at all possible, it's going to be way better on your credit report. Well, excellent. That's some very practical advice. That's a great way to end the segment. Thanks very much, Adam. We'll be back to continue and wrap it up right after this. You're listening to Debt Free in 30.
What are the warning signs of debt problems? Where can I find a free online debt options calculator? Where can I get free ebooks and guides? Find all the answers at moneyproblems.ca, the website for Canadians with money problems who want money solutions. moneyproblems.ca.
You're listening to Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Welcome back. It's time for the 30-second recap of what we discussed today. On today's show, Adam answered lots of questions about cars, the 407, and paying off a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal early. That's the 30-second recap of what we discussed today. We covered a lot of ground on today's show, and as you can see, even simple-sounding questions have answers with many wrinkles depending on your situation. So if you have debt problems, talk to a professional who can give you specific answers based on your unique situation. More information is available on our website at hoyes.com. That's HOYES.com. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.
Thanks for listening. This was Debt Free in 30.
If debt problems are keeping you up at night, if collection calls leave you afraid to answer the phone, it's time to end the cycle. You can do something about your debt. Call Hoyes Michaelis today at 310-PLAN.